Nothing on the show is to be construed as legal advice. The contents of this show are for informational purposes only.
Hello, welcome to Know Your Rights, the Consumer Lawcast, with your host, myself, Abbas Kazerounian. This week, we are going to be discussing the tragic topic of the wildfires in the state of California. We're very lucky we've got fire attorney Ali Sadrarhami of Kazerounian Law Group, who's helped numerous volumes of consumers, specifically in the 2018 fire season, and he's already representing some victims of the 2019 season. Hello, welcome Ali, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Not for the right reasons, but it looks like the 2019 fire season in the state of California is going to be record-breaking. It just seems to be so vast. So can you give our audience a little bit of an update of what's really been going on and how it's affected California?
Absolutely, sure. So we're looking at already to date about 192,000 acres burnt. We have 6,190 separate incidents this year. We're looking at about 3 fatalities and about 730 structures that are completely destroyed or damaged in some way.
Wow. It kind of shocks me that in 2019, people are fatalities. People are dying in fire disasters when, our society is so developed, and we should be preventing that. So that's almost 200,000 acres, Ali. Where in California are we specifically talking?
The thing is, it's everywhere. It's literally everywhere. Southern California, central, northern. We're looking at in Sonoma County, in the Butte County with the Kincaid fire. We have down here Southern California with the Getty. We're looking at the Maria fire, as well as the Saddle Ridge fire, which was in Sylmar. So literally everywhere this season.
I've never seen anything like it, and I've lived in California for a very long time. And I think Governor Newsom actually declared it a state of emergency.
Right.
And that's what the debate between him and Trump has been going on regarding the federal funds and all that kind of stuff. But we won't get into that. The real issue is, and I don't want to get right into it, is how people can possibly help mitigate the damage or protect themselves. And I want to cut the program in half, really, kind of as far as people that have already been affected and people that are in the danger or about to be affected. So, Ali, let me give you a hypothetical. You're new to California and you've just started living here. How do you know if you're in a potential fire zone?
Well, look, the first thing I would recommend is visiting fire.ca.gov. CAL FIRE is absolutely fantastic, not only at putting fires out, but at providing tips of what to do and whether or not you are in a fire risk area, a high fire risk area. So certainly check that website out, see where you are, and if you find that you are in a high fire risk area, one of the most important things you could do that I always tell my clients, because I get this question every time there's a fire, is inventory. Walk through your home. Just pull out your phone, any camera, and literally walk through your entire home and take pictures of everything you have, film everything you have. You can turn on the video, go through, open every drawer, open the closets. This will help you immensely when it comes to dealing with your insurance company.
What a great tip right there. Who doesn't have a cell phone, right?
Absolutely.
Every smartphone has a camera on it. You just put it on record as if you're doing a video, right?
Absolutely.
And I'm guessing the reason why we would be doing this is because if in the unfortunate circumstance of this, you being a victim of the fires, you're not going to be able to remember everything in your house.
Of course, and look, even if you're 1% of the population that saves receipts for absolutely everything you've ever purchased, where are those receipts likely going to be stored? In your home. If your home catches fire, that's not going to be of much use. So you want a way of having everything documented so that we can assist you and make your life easier when it comes to actually recovering for things that you've lost in a fire.
So you don't even have to sit down and write an Excel sheet, like if you're just preparing for it. You
Absolutely
can
not.
But let's take it a step further. So you've got it on your telephone, and people lose their cell phone. So, should you email it to yourself maybe? Or,
Absolutely. Look,
how do you back it up?
iCloud, there's so many forms of data storage now online. Put on the iCloud, put it on, OneDrive, anything that you can. Email it to yourself, email it to family, to friend, whatever you can do. You want numerous copies. This will make your life easier when it comes to recovering your lost items.
So this is something that if you're in a potential fire zone, you're doing to prepare for the worst case scenario.
Absolutely.
But I think, it doesn't have to be a fire. I mean, that could be useful in an earthquake situation. Anything that destroys your home,
Absolutely.
that's going to come in useful.
I tell people, regardless of where you live, a high fire risk area or not, for the exact reason that you just said, do this anyway. Take the inventory. No one, as you mentioned, is going to remember the contents of their home. Whether you live in a studio or a mansion, no one remembers everything that they've bought.
Right, and I'm going to come into this for the people that have already been affected, but let's assume, let's mix it up a little bit. Let's assume you have been affected and you've done the whole, you've done what, Ali Sadrarhami has recommended. You've got it on your, video. Is the insurance company going to come back and go, well, you don't have a receipt for that item in that drawer? How does that work?
Absolutely. So, look, ideally the insurance companies would pay out what they're supposed to pay out, and they would pay you for the belongings.
Because they're your best friend, right?
Because they're your best friend, and you've been paying premium, so why not?
Yeah.
Of course, this issue does arise, and they may lead you to believe that the only way you're going to recover anything is if you have everything itemized, a receipt for everything.
Is that a fallacy?
That is absolutely a fallacy, simply not true.
Ali, I've done my inventory. I've taken full stock of everything I have in my home, done exactly what you've suggested. Now, one of the requirements of having a mortgage, and 99.9% of people in our society have a mortgage, they don't pay cash for their homes, right? And one of the requirements is that you have to have your home insured, home insurance. So if I have home insurance, I've got my inventory, is that enough?
It helps, but I can confidently tell you now that there is no one who is going to be fully covered when it comes to an incident like this, when it comes to a disaster such as the wildfires we've been seeing this season.
Stop right there. I want you to repeat that for our audience. Say that one more time.
So again, there is no one that is going to be completely covered by their insurance for a wildfire such as this.
That's a crazy, Ali, that's a crazy statement.
The reason is twofold, so let me explain. Number one, these aren't isolated incidents. You're not looking at one home that's burnt because someone left the stove on. These are entire communities this season that we're seeing burnt. Towns, cities. When we flew into Butte County last year to look at some of the homes of our clients that we were representing, it was absolutely surreal. We were driving through an entire county that was completely incinerated.
Were you on a Mars or something? It was just completely foreign?
There was nothing I can say to adequately express what that feeling was like when we got there. I mean, we saw the pictures, you watched the videos of the news, but not until you walk through an entire community that was a beautiful community that's completely incinerated, completely gone. Nothing but ash and rubble of
So it's all black?
Absolutely. It was. So the point being, when you're dealing with a situation where an entire community needs to be rebuilt, the demand for labor and supplies skyrockets. And what happens when the demand increases is the cost of that same labor and those same supplies increases.
Okay, this is a really somewhat of a simple concept, but I think we need to break it down. So let's hypothetically say you have a home that's worth $500,000, which in California is almost every house is that or more, We live in a very expensive state. So you have insurance because you've got a mortgage for $500,000, your house is insured for $500,000, okay? So my house burns down. Now, first of all, let's break this down right now. The $500,000, does that include all the contents, or is it just to build the house?
That's usually just going to be your cost to rebuild or your cost to relocate. So that's just the home. And then depending on your policy, you may or may not be fully covered for all the contents that you want.
So the first thing we got to look into is pull your policy out, and does it include all your contents? Are you insured? Do you have enough insurance
Absolutely.
to cover for everything that's in the house? Forget about the structure.
Absolutely.
But let's go back to the structure. You mentioned something really, really interesting here. So we've got this 500,000 hypothetical house that we're talking about. The entire city or the entire town is burnt down, and you live. And this tends to happen in more rural areas, give or take. Fair?
Absolutely. Historically, these fires have been taking place in usually the same areas. We've seen Sonoma County, for instance. We've had at least 2 large fires in the last 2 years. Butte County. So historically, we're sort of seeing a pattern.
East County, San Diego County is like another place. Okay.
Absolutely.
So we've got these rural areas. So when you're talking about these certain geographic areas, first of all, they're not that metropolitan. They tend to be more rural. And that probably inevitably means that there's only a certain amount of laborers, construction workers, architects, in those geographical areas.
Certainly.
And they can only be building X amount of houses at any one time, which inevitably, using normal economic principles, the higher the demand, and the demand is the entire town, spikes the price up, which means
Correct.
that if your house in a vacuum had burnt down, would have probably cost only $500 to build it. But now, because you're one amongst thousands or hundreds, that price may now be skyrocketed to $600,000.
Absolutely. And we're seeing this. We see this every time a fire of this magnitude takes place.
And the buzzword here is you're probably underinsured in a mass fire situation.
Correct. And so that's just the first reason. The second reason is that the insurance companies, no matter how great your policy is, let's say it covered that entire cost to relocate or that cost to rebuild, they're still not going to pay you for things that I believe, at least, you're entitled to in a case like this.
Like what?
Well, the most obvious example would be something like emotional distress damages. Now, I think there's...
You know what? Can I interrupt you right there,
Sure.
Ali? Like, I think that's its own topic that I want to get to. But let's get into things like real tangible items that people may not think about or have value. So,
Sure.
I'm originally from England, and oak trees are a big deal in England. Like, that's like one of our, the trees that, I don't know, it's an English thing. Let's forget about it. But oak trees are very, very slow in growing. That's the reason I'm using it, right? So if you have an oak tree in your garden and it's 150 years old and it's big and it takes a long, long time to grow that big, that has a value, right?
Absolutely, and that's something that your insurance company is not going to cover you for. We have, so...
How much is an oak tree worth?
The tree, exactly, and we're dealing with things that have an intrinsic value in them, things that you cannot place dollar figures on.
Talking about going back to the the coffee mug in a minute, which I'll put that into, and the heirlooms and all that. I'll put that into emotional damages. But I want to go back to the tree because I'm weird like that. So talking about the tree, I think like a 150-year-old oak tree has a lot of value. But you're telling me the insurance company is not going to pay me for that. Is that something that's I can potentially get paid for from an insurance? Can you insure your oak tree?
So these are the sorts of damages that we're looking to recover from the party that was actually liable and responsible in causing the fire. Because I'll tell you now, good luck arguing with your insurance company the value of that oak tree that took 150 years to grow. But it still is a very real loss that you've suffered. And those are the types of damages that we're trying to recover above and beyond what you're getting from your insurance company from the party that started the actual fire.
So I think the overarching message that I'm hearing here, Ali, is this. Most people are underinsured because you're really insuring the minimum, which is the amount of your mortgage. But there are things that we're not thinking about. Things like oak trees.
Right.
And I'm going to get into the emotional damages in a minute. But I really want to hone in on this underinsured issue, okay? And one thing that insurance companies love is your premiums. And you can pretty much insure anything. Okay, and you can buy umbrella policies, which means that you have your minimal policy, and then you can buy a policy over and above that. Okay, or you can say I want additional insurance. Now, some insurance companies will insure, some will not. If you get a real good agent, and I found dealing with my own house, a good agent is going to go shop and be able to get you more insurance than you actually have as a minimal requirement that's mandated by your mortgage provider. And so that's something that you would recommend if obviously it's affordable to our audience, right?
Absolutely. Anything that you think has a chance of being lost that means something to you. If you can get insurance for it and if you can't afford those premiums comfortably, why not? I would say go ahead and do it.
Okay, so you heard it here first. Check your insurance. If you can afford to increase that insurance and you're in a fire zone or in danger of things like earthquakes, things like that, definitely look into it. Talk to your insurance adjuster or agent. Now, I've been holding you off on the emotional damages, and so let's get to that, right?
Sure.
Emotional damages. What are emotional damages?
So I think, first of all, I think it's important to state that there seems to be a stigma attached with the phrase emotional damages. People hear it and they think it's something that attorneys maybe make up just to inflate the recovery that their clients get. It's important to remember that we're dealing not with a simple fender bender here. We're dealing with a wildfire. We're talking about, my clients have told me horrific stories of escaping with their lives, and if they're lucky enough, the lives of their loved ones, from hellfire. We're talking about real trauma here.
Right.
And the law does, fortunately, provide for that, for instances
And
of
before
that.
we get into the law, like I remember I was working with you on some cases last year, on the 2018 wildfire cases in Paradise. One thing I learned from you was the level of trauma. You said, like, has real trauma. This is not a fender bender. Can you tell us the level of trauma, like the kind of PTSD that these victims have?
So especially in that fire that we worked together with, there were over 80 lives lost, represented clients who lost family members. So the level of trauma is significant. And what we learned, everyone knows losing your home in a fire is obviously a terrible tragedy.
Yeah.
But even we learned a lot from our experts. We always bring experts on boards for cases like this. We have whether it's a contractor or a realtor or whatever it is, CAL FIRE, of course. But we also have psych experts, people to come in and explain.
You mean psychiatric experts?
Psychiatric experts,
okay.
Correct, excuse me. To come in and sort of explain to us, who are not psych experts, on how bad is this trauma, how exactly does this impact people. And we found out from them that losing your home in a fire is considered to be one of the top 5 worst things psychologically that can happen to an individual. It's up there with losing a loved one. You're talking about the space that you feel safe in. You're talking about the place that you grew up in or your kids grew up in, where you shared memories. And there's a certain feeling of violation when you lose that through no fault of your own.
I remember, one of the experts telling us that it's up there with a veteran that's been in actual combat.
Absolutely.
And coming home and reliving that. And these victims are really reliving that, and it's a horrific experience for them.
Certainly, and for the first few months, we had several clients who were simply in shock, where we would meet with them, and I'm sure you remember, I think we met some individuals together.
Yeah.
And when you spoke to them, it was as if nothing had happened. It was as if you were just having coffee.
It was
It
was such a difference how people react.
Absolutely.
I thought you had people that were still in shock, that as if nothing had happened, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where they were just literally breaking down.
Exactly. And so some of those people, when they hear emotional distress, they would, I guess, there's an element of pride as well, where they say, look, I just want what I lost, nothing more. But then 3 months later, that same individual may call me with tears on the phone, explaining, this just hit me. I just realized what happened, and hey, I'm having trouble sleeping at night, and I don't know exactly why. This is why we think that emotional distress damages are a very, very real thing, and no level of pride should prevent you from getting compensation that you deserve for this.
Well put, Ali. Thank you. So, in the same vein, and obviously not as dramatic as things like psychiatric issues and PTSD and things like that, but one of the things that I learned working with you and with the experts are the things that are not tangible. So for example, I remember talking to clients, and they would talk about a necklace that somebody's mother had given them as an heirloom that belonged to their mother and their mother and all that kind of thing. And the value of the necklace may have not been that much, a couple $100 or something, but it was that emotional attachment to the family heirloom, and that that particular client had ambitions and dreams of giving it to their daughter, who would then pass it on to their daughter, and so on and so forth. How do you put a value on something like that?
Well, it's very difficult to do that. It's very difficult to play. How do you put a dollar figure on that necklace, or on a greeting card that says, world's greatest dad, and you got on Father's Day from an estranged son? I mean, these are the little details that your insurance company is not going to care about. The party that caused the fire most likely is not going to put the same level of value on that you would. This is why, to be quite honest, I tell clients every single time something like this happens, they say, how are you going to make me whole? How can I be made whole? And the first thing I tell them is, you can't. We can't make you whole. No one can. The level of loss that these individuals have suffered, the trauma in addition to those things that simply can't be replaced, is such that there is absolutely nothing we can do, and no amount of money we can get them that's going to make them whole.
Right.
But we're sure as hell going to try. And so what does that mean? It means getting the right experts. It means making your case, explaining to a judge or jury or to the other party that caused the fire why certain things have the value that we're claiming they do.
I think it's an issue. Like, I think what you're talking about is you're never going to be able to make those individuals whole, but you're going to try and make it easier at least, right?
Right. I think the goal here is, one, to alleviate, these people who are going through these fires, who've lost their homes, who've lost a loved one, or just all their contents, or have had to uproot, they're dealing with so much. Right. On a daily basis, from having to replace a toothbrush the next morning to finding shelter for you and your family. The goal is to, at the very least, alleviate the financial stress from the situation as much as possible.
Right.
Now, it's not going to be same day, but it's going to be to alleviate the financial stress as much as possible. And the other goal is to punish the party responsible, is to deter them from making the same poor decisions that they made today in the future. Mm-hmm. So we want to put a stop to this as much as we can,
right.
Do everything we can to prevent it from occurring again, and also alleviating the financial stress for clients.
Right. I think that's a good transition to, I think you've already covered a lot of it, but going into people that have already been affected.
Sure.
So, I've seen you work with victims of fires, and I think they have some immediate needs. Let's discuss that a little bit, about what are the needs of these people? How can you or others help them, or how can these people help themselves, get the basicness? Because they have nowhere to live that day. You come home, your house is burnt. You're lucky to be alive, but you've lost everything in your life, apart from the clothes on your back. That conceptually, I think, is hard for me to understand, never mind the average viewer or the average listener. That is crazy to me. Like, you have your entire life in one building. We do that, right? We hoard all our stuff in one building. And then we come home and it's not there.
Absolutely.
I have nowhere to sleep. I have maybe my car if I'm lucky enough to have one. The clothes on my back. What am I going to do?
It's the same for everyone. You could be a millionaire the next day. What you need is food, water, shelter. These are the basic necessities that when we go to communities that have gone through something like this.
But that's good and well, Ali. Like, I want to interrupt you there, right?
Sure.
So, this show is not about the 1%. This show is about the 99%,
right.
Okay? And the 1%, they can go to a glitzy hotel, and they've got the money in their bank account, and even they know they've got good lawyers, they're going to go after the insurance company, and they're going to be all right. But I'm talking about the average guy that's living paycheck to paycheck that can't afford to go and stay at a hotel that night. What is that person going to do?
I wish there was a perfect answer for this, but there really isn't.
There isn't.
There isn't. But one positive aspect that, and I know you shared in this experience with me, was when we went and visited certain communities that had just gone through a disaster like this. The way these communities come together was something beyond anything I've ever seen before. The level of just human compassion, people passing out food, not just the Red Cross, but just people. These are things that you could do if you're near an area that's been affected, or people that have been affected. Help out however you can, and we're really talking about basic necessities here: food, water, shelter, clothing,
sure.
A toothbrush, anything like that helps.
But people are proud, right? They don't want charity; they just want what's right,
sure.
Right? Is my insurance company going to pay for me to go stay in a hotel till they find out that they find some alternate like accommodation for me and my family? That's what I want to know, because
sure.
Again, like if I'm somebody that's living paycheck to paycheck, that is the first thing on my mind, because I understand I may be able to go stay with my cousin, I may be able to go stay with my friend, but how long? I don't want my kids sleeping on a couch. Like, I'd worked hard to get that house, their beds, their clothes, Yeah,
and you've been paying your insurance premiums every month after month, year after year. And that's why there's two words to remember: cash advance. You are entitled to this from your insurance company. You want to reach out. You want to have a communicative relationship with your insurance agent or adjuster. You want to be on the phone the day it happens, the day after it happens. As soon as you get to safety, you want to make that call and say, hey, I need a place to stay, I need food to eat, I need a cash advance. And this is something that any attorney who may be assisting you with the actual fire, whether they're going after, a public utility company or a waste management company, those same attorneys should, free of charge, hopefully, if they're doing their jobs right.
So these attorneys are just gonna and I'm gonna take you to task on this, Ali.
Sure.
It's attorneys don't usually work for free, right?
Right.
So you're telling me an attorney is just gonna go and get money from the insurance company?
Well,
for me?
what they should be doing at the very least is not only going over your policy, your insurance policy with you,
Right.
because any attorney who's been doing this long enough and who's been battling these sorts of cases, insurance is not a new thing for them. They deal with insurance companies all the time. So they should be sitting there with you, and yes, for no additional cost, no additional percentage on a contingency, should be going over your policies with you, seeing exactly what you're entitled to, and guiding you in the right direction and advising you on how to speak with your insurance company to get everything that you're entitled
Let's
to.
go back. Let's go back before we even get there, right? Hypothetical victim of a fire. They've done everything that we've talked about. They know the fundamentals, but ultimately they're in a legal sort of kind of gray area. They don't know all the answers, and they want some answers, some questions answered. Should a consultation be something that attorneys charge for?
Absolutely not, and certainly not in a situation like this. We're talking about real loss here. We're talking about lives lost, homes lost, all your belongings. One tip I'd like to give, and I'm sorry if it offends any attorneys out there who are doing this, but I'm not really sorry. But here's the thing. In most cases like this, number one, you should not be paying out of pocket even a dime for any attorney services with a case like this. You're going to be dealing with a contingency fee, right? So an attorney's going
What
to
does
say...
that mean?
An attorney's going to say, we'll advance all the costs, we'll advance everything, you're not liable for a penny out of pocket, of course the work. In the end, if and only if they're successful in obtaining a recovery for you, then they get a percentage.
Okay, great transition here, because we just spent a considerable amount of time talking about being underinsured, right? So, I've worked real hard to make sure that I have the right amount of insurance to put me, or try and put me in the place where I started, which is get me a house and some of the things that I had before. But if the attorney is going to come and say, I want a third of that, you're going to be underinsured again.
Absolutely. So this is why it's really important before you sign that agreement with your attorney, whoever he or she may be, to really read it. And especially when it comes to that contingency fee portion of it, let's say 33% is a contingency fee that attorney is going to.
Is that about right? Is it like what's the variance on these contingency fees?
I've seen it higher. I think the standard, as far as what I've seen, is about 33 1/3%.
Okay.
However, what not all firms do, although they should morally, if not ethically, is you want to ensure that that 33% is only being applied to the recovery that's obtained from the party being sued.
Beyond insurance.
Beyond the insurance. So if we're talking about the Butte County fire or the Kincaid fire now, we're looking at PG&E, for instance, right? Everyone was suing PG&E to recover that 33%. And this needs to be in black and white. You don't take your attorney's word for it. It needs to be in writing that 33% is only applicable to that.
It should be applicable.
It should only be applicable.
So let's get to say, they can, if they want to, and you agree to it, charge you for 33% of anything that they recover.
Of course, and that's what some of these agreements do. They're very vague, they're very broad, and it just says 33% of anything we recover for you. So what happens in that case, you've been paying your premium month after month, year after year. Your attorney helps you drafting an email to your insurance agent, looks over your policy with you and says, this is what you're entitled to, this is the words you should use when you speak to your adjuster, and now you get that $400,000 policy.
Mm-hmm.
Is it fair for you, does it sound fair to have 33% come out of that and go into the attorney's pocket?
Not to me.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
You've been paying your premiums, you've been doing everything right, and for some advice on the side, the case here is the wildfire. It's going after whether it's the public utility company, or in the case of the recent fire here, the Sandalwood fire, the CR&R, the waste management company. The contingency fee should apply only to that and not to the policy that you're
And is this what you practice yourself?
Absolutely, absolutely. Anything beyond that is in my view not ethical at all.
Well, I think we got to draw a distinction between moral and ethical.
Certainly
Yeah,
not moral.
Yeah.
Now, and here's the thing. it may come to a point where you do need to do a little more for your client in regard to the insurance company.
But that's part of the service, though. That should, I mean, if I'm in that situation and I hire an attorney and I know that they've got a case against the wrongdoing party as far as what the fire has done and how it was caused, I want their help to assist me with the insurance company and not be nickel and diming me on that. Is that part of the service that our listeners and viewers should be looking for when choosing their lawyer?
I think so, absolutely, 100%. The goal, ideally, we're all on the same side. The attorneys of the victims, and the insurance company. Because here's something a lot of people don't know: the insurance companies are suing the parties at fault here as well. Your insurance company.
That's called subrogation.
There you go. So your insurance company, after paying you on the policy,
they're getting their money back anyway.
They're going to turn around and they're going to sue whether it's PG&E, SoCal Edison, CR&R, and say, hey, we just had to pay this out due to your negligence or due to whatever it is that you did. We want that money back. So hopefully.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is going to be a recurring theme on our show, ladies and gents. Don't feel bad for insurance companies. They have one mission in life: make money, make money, make money. And even though it looks like in this particular scenario, in the fire scenario, they are, they're hard done by because they're having to pay out, these, whatever amount you've been insured for, irrespective of the fact that you've been paying premiums your entire working life, and they've been happily taking and cashing those checks. They are not going to be out of pocket because they do what's called subrogation, right, Ali?
Absolutely.
That's when, after they've paid you, they themselves are going to go after the wrongdoing party, which in the case of like the Paradise Fires, PG&E, and they're going to double dip. They've got your premiums, which should have already paid for what they've paid out to you. They again are going to go and double dip and get their money again from PG&E.
Absolutely. The only victim are the victims. It's not the insurance company. It's you. It's whoever lost something in a case like this. You have to only look out for yourself.
And your family.
And your family, of course. And you want to ensure that whoever you have assisting you with the actual fire is also going to be assisting you on the sidelines with. And look, I should point out that there are times when you need to go one step beyond. There are times when your insurance company is going to simply not pay out on a policy that they should. They're not going to answer you in a reasonable amount of time. There are situations where you're going to have to step in and perhaps file what's called a bad faith insurance claim against your insurance company. At that point, if that need arises, then you can sign a separate agreement with the same attorney or another attorney to do that. The important thing is to keep them separate.
So that's a separate issue, separate and apart from the fire, right?
Correct.
And when we're talking about bad faith, we're talking about the bad faith conduct of the insurance carrier.
Of the insurance carrier, correct. Because, I think the problem stems from a lot of people are expecting to run into troubles with their insurance companies from the get-go, and attorneys out there could mislead an individual into thinking that, they need to sign one agreement that encompasses every party potentially involved in a case like this. So they'll say, okay, 33% for anything that we recover for you, and this applies to the insurance company, it applies to PG&E, for instance. What you want is to keep it separate because there is a chance, and the hope is that you won't have to file a claim against your insurance company, a bad faith insurance lawsuit. And if that's the case, the majority of our clients don't end up having to do that, which is why our agreements with the client initially says very clearly that this 33% does not apply to any money that we assist you in recovering from your insurance company.
We've got a couple takeaways here, at least the way I'm listening to you, Ali. Number one, I think when you are choosing your lawyer in a scenario like this, it's really, really important to take your time and shop your attorney. Attorneys are just like any other commodity, right? You're not just going to go buy the first car that you ever see. You go test drive it, and then if you don't like it, or you go test drive another, comparable vehicle, and whichever one you prefer, you're going to choose. And part of that shopping is that you have to read the black and white. Take your time, read it. Don't just rely on whatever it is that they're telling you. Make sure that it feels fair to you. It feels right to you. And furthermore, and for me, it's like something like this is such a personal experience that it's a very sensitive experience. It's a tragic experience. I feel like that relationship between client an attorney is a very personal one. It should be a personal one in any area of law, but specifically in this one, because you want to feel like someone is on your side, someone is really advocating for you in probably what is the most horrific thing that has happened to you and your family. And I think it's really important to take that time to feel that connection. And only when you feel that connection,
Absolutely.
you retain that attorney to assist you. I think lastly, like the issue that I want to just talk about is just very briefly so that our listeners and viewers understand is, what are you suing and who are you suing? Like, what are you suing for?
So that varies. The answer to that question varies. The majority of fires this season, for instance, have been caused by public utility companies.
What's a public utility company?
So a public utility company, whether privately owned or not, private investors or not,
It's pseudo-governmental.
it's pseudo-governmental, quasi-governmental, and because it's for the public use, for the public benefit, if you will. And the way the law works in California is we have a certain California considers public utility companies, regardless of the type of ownership, to be, as you said, pseudo or quasi-governmental entities. And the significance of that is the laws that you're able to invoke when filing a lawsuit against this sort of company.
So just to give you guys a few examples of a pseudo-governmental or a entity or a utility, PG&E would be one, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because it's for the public use and, their product is electricity, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so we have a statute here in California known as inverse condemnation. And what that statute is it actually stems from the takings clause of the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, which essentially states that if the government takes your property, they need to compensate you for it.
Right.
So in cases involving public utility companies, you're able to invoke this statute, this inverse condemnation, and without even proving that the company was negligent, which I'll get to in a second, because that word means something very different than when we use it colloquially. So even without proving negligence, as long as a fire was caused by a public utility company and that fire destroyed your property, off the bat you are entitled to compensation for that due to the statute known as inverse condemnation.
Wow.
Now, what do you do when you're dealing with...
So it's a constitutional right.
It's a constitutional right, absolutely. Now, what do you do in the case of the Sandalwood fire when you're dealing with a waste management company where maybe you can't invoke that same statute? You can use negligence, which is what I mentioned earlier. And negligence, what it means in a court of law is essentially everyone at any given time has a duty to behave a certain way, to act or to refrain from acting a certain way. If you breach that duty and cause some sort of harm, resulting in some real damages, like the loss of a house.
And that action that brought about that harm has to be somewhat foreseeable, right?
Correct, exactly. And so if that happens, then you can say that this party is negligent. So in the case of CR&R, you really have to, it may not be as simple.
CR&R?
Excuse me, CR&R, the waste management company.
Okay.
That seems to have caused the Sandalwood fire. So in those cases, you kind of have to go back to your roots as an attorney and really build up your case. You need to prove that some wrongdoing occurred, not just that, yes, this equipment started the fire and this equipment is owned by the public utility, so now I can receive compensation. You need to show that this party was negligent.
So to give some context, I think very approximately, and correct me if I'm wrong, what happened in the Sandalwood fire is you have a waste management truck that realized it had a fire in its garbage in the back of it.
Correct.
And then it just stopped on the side of the road and then emptied out the fire on a field.
Right. So it was a little churn out right next to dry brush in a field as far as the eye can see, with the Via Calamesa mobile home park being on the other end on the side of that brush. So what happened here was the driver, upon noticing some smoldering waste in the hopper, like you said, pulled off into this churnout, dumped it right next to the field. The field, of course, caught fire, and the fire consumed over 1,100 acres, just destroyed everything in its path, including almost all of the mobile home parks, over 70 or so acres destroyed.
So putting that into practice, of what you just said, the law is it foreseeable that putting, something that's burning into dry brush in a field, is that going to potentially cause harm? And my answer is yes.
Right, and I'm sure everyone has heard, I'm sure you've heard varying accounts on this. Some people are saying, well, the driver wasn't negligent, he did everything right, he wanted to save himself, he wanted to save the company vehicle, and he wanted to prevent maybe an explosion of the vehicle as well. All good points. Others are saying, yes, he should have dumped the trash, but maybe not where he did, exactly where he did, and maybe not without having first called the fire department, or at the very least, simultaneous to dumping, call the fire department and given his exact coordinates, that this is where I am, this is what's happening, which we believe, after speaking to some experts, is the way it should play out.
Got it.
As far as we know, the policy is, and of course, light will be shed on this through litigation.
Of course.
This is the point of it.
I just wanted to
doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
But we certainly are taking the stance at this point that he was negligent. And we went there, we visited it, of course, we drove through, and I, at least, I'm no fire expert like Cal Fire, but I saw several places that he probably would have been better off dumping that trash.
What Ali's saying is it wasn't his first rodeo. So, like, he sees some potential liability. Listen,
Sure.
Ali, it's been really educational. Thank you so much for being here. And for our viewers and listeners, if you have any questions that you want to put to Ali directly, his email address is ali@kazlg.com. That's Ali at kazlg.com. Well, until next week, if you have any questions, send us them by email, which is questions@knowyourrightspodcast.com. questions@knowyourrightspodcast.com. Anyway, it's been lovely having you in our realm here. Until next time, keep it legal.